Financial crime has been around for as long as money itself, but the fickle pace of fraud has changed as many times as the way we like to pay. As fraud prevention technology increases in sophistication, traditional fraud methods are on the decline and are being replaced with social engineering attacks that rely on deception and manipulation of people, the true weak points. Across the world, APP scams are costing consumers and financial institutions billions each year. But is there a way to put a stop to it for good? Much of the fraud we see today is made possible through what's called social engineering, exploiting a person's trust to obtain money directly or to obtain confidential information to enable access to financial information and accounts.
Social engineering is not new. Social engineering has been around for 20, 30, 40 years. In the past, it's been known, a US term that's been used in the fraud world or fraud prevention world for a long time is dumpster diving, so going through your paper waste. Made easier for the fraudsters when we started to recycle our paper.
For social engineering to be successful, criminals go fishing to find the most vulnerable individuals, researching, using psychological techniques, as well as stolen personal data to hone in on their potential victims. After gaining the individual's trust and persuading them to make financial transactions, believing there is a legitimate reason to do so, the money is led directly to the criminal's hands through mule accounts, totally under their control.
So social engineering is about the fraudster gaining information about you as an individual that will allow them to steal your money from you in any way that they can think of. And the methodologies have changed. They can use social media. There's a lot about you on social media that perhaps you shouldn't be sharing on social media.
In countries like Brazil or even in India, where social media is the key way to communicate, like WhatsApp or Instagram messages, Facebook messages, they will actually find a way to compromise an account from someone and just pretend to be a family member.
It's easy to think that those who fall for scams are naive or lack financial literacy. Yet many scams today are beyond sophisticated and are almost impossible to differentiate from legitimate communications. Criminals take advantage of the trust that victims have built with reputable organizations, friends, and family members to create a sense of urgency and maximize the opportunity for a successful scam.
So people look at victims sometimes as if, I would never have fallen for that, or how stupid could they be? But when you actually look at the sophistication of the fraudsters and the organisation behind their activities, in my view, there are so many ways that victims can fall for these scams and really truly believe that they are not being a victim. And this is all part of the hugely strong storylines in the organisation, in organised crime, that allows these fraud victims to become victims because they're so convincing.
A well-known example is the romance scam.
Big problem today, for example, are the romance scams, where you find someone on the internet, you start having a relationship, you build some type of trust with that person, and then you will initiate a transaction to one of those criminal destinations.
On top of the emotional harm, the financial loss to individuals involved in social engineering scams can be life-changing, and the impact is only growing.
So to give some context to the amounts we're talking about for fraud, in the UK in 2022, card fraud losses were estimating at $716 million lost by banks to card fraud. Authorized push payment fraud, on the other hand, we're going to see 973 million in terms of losses. And the growth curves in those two charts are not the same.
But it's not just the defrauded victims who are paying the price. Financial institutions are also bearing the cost of social engineering-based fraud, and not only in terms of reimbursing losses. Negative customer experiences reduce confidence and drive customers away.
When asked about what they did after being a victim of fraud, our survey respondents 26% of them stated that they closed their accounts one way or another. This 26% is your attrition rate of customers as a result of fraud losses. Not only as a financial institution do you experience financial loss if you are reimbursing your customers, and you should be in order to avoid them moving elsewhere, but there's also this 26% of consumers who will simply stop using services as a result of the experience of fraud, move elsewhere, use their accounts less.
Social engineering shines a spotlight on vulnerabilities in the security process. The rising requirement for individuals to authenticate their transactions puts the onus on the customer to act. And, as we know, where human action is involved, this can be exploited by fraudsters.
It's created this APP fraud environment that has flourished because, in a way, the fact that it is you making that transfer, and we can prove that because we've asked a piece of you to be part of that authentication process, has created that confidence at the bank that it is you making that transfer. And that transfer then gets allowed to happen. So it's almost like it's a catch-22 scenario. Everything that the banks do creates a new way of thinking in the heads of the fraudsters.
As the payments landscape evolves, so too does the opportunity for criminals. With real-time payments, they can use their persuasive techniques to take advantage of the immediacy in which the money can land in their hands.
So in immediate payments, we are going in the real-time transaction path. So when we're talking about immediate payments, there's no chargeback. So when you do interactive alerting in real time, you basically stop the transaction, put it on hold, ask the customer for a confirmation either with a biometric or by a response from the phone, and then you make a decision based on that response whether to let the transaction go through or not.
When introducing new mitigating strategies, there is a need to strike a balance between increasing the protection for account holders without adding friction to the customer banking experience. Advances in fraud prevention, such as two-factor authentication, one-time passwords, and a push to make customer banking interactions more secure through apps and online banking, are a part of the answer. But these strategies will come with their own customer-centric risks.
Is almost, in a way, playing in the hands of the fraudster, because there will always be that weakest link in the chain where money is being moved. And right now, that weakest link is the account holder, the individual.
Accepting responsibility for and compensating customer losses are important aspects of the fraud prevention debate. Who should be held accountable, and how does sharing the responsibility help to focus minds on the problem?
So there's a lot of effort now in terms of making sure that every peer, every entity involved in one of those real-time payment transactions do take some accountability and do have the proper controls in place to mitigate fraud from that perspective.
In the UK, the government is clamping down on cold calls and mass SMSs, and regulators have already made the first move by looking at making the initiating and receiving banks equally responsible for compensating customer losses where applicable. But this approach could go even further. Similarly, Australia is looking to create a cross-industry code in response to the scam epidemic to ensure scammers can't exploit the weak link.
And right now, it's limited to two parties, the issuing bank and the receiving bank. But should there be incentives for other players to take responsibility for the activities of the fraudster? So when you look at a scam, there are many platforms outside of the bank's own platforms that are used by the fraudsters in order to complete and be successful with that scam. It could be social media, it could be the telcos, as well as the banks. So by excluding the responsibility element for these frauds in the eyes of the social media giants and also the telco giants, is that the right approach? I think only time will really tell.